Welcome to Alchemical Science. I'm Jordan, an open source researcher who investigates ideas that are usually either very old, very new, or very esoteric. I've been on a mission this last year to discover the true origin of numbers and of our systems of mathematics and the measurement of space and time. I discovered during this research that the way that we perceive numbers generally and the information we derive from them represents a very limited and linear understanding of what a number truly is and what it represents. This video aims to be the first in a series that discusses the foundations of mathematics from the ground up, going back to basics to explore the absolute fundamentals of the form and function of numbers. It doesn't require any complex knowledge or experience in mathematics to follow along. Much of this is not part of the conventional academic mathematical curriculum, and I will not necessarily be explaining things the conventional way either. Just a little disclaimer in case this is something that bothers you. We'll mostly be exploring the different aspects of the same three-digit number, 864, which, as we shall soon discover, is a highly harmonic number and serves as a fantastic example to demonstrate how a short sequence of digits can contain a wealth of information. This journey to the heart of numbers led me through some pretty wild places, and there are many people who I have to credit for providing me with the answers or the clues during the search. The first is Malcolm Bendall. He taught me the majority of these different ways to view numbers or different aspects of numbers personally or through his work. This video serves as a compilation of the laws which he used to write the sequences and equations in his notes and construct the Plasmoid Unification Model. Malcolm collaborated on the drafts for this video, and he took the time to clarify and explain many concepts that I was unsure of. And although I'm certainly happy to take the credit for the grunt work it took to translate and compile these laws and sequences, the majority of what's here is primarily based on the work and teachings of Malcolm Bendall, and he should be credited as such. The second is Marko Rodin. There is a lot of crossover between Malcolm and Marko's teachings on mathematics, and I consider Sanskrit maths to be somewhat synonymous with Vortex-based maths. I'm a direct student of Marko's as well, and he rarely endorses or gives feedback on anything as a rule, but I credit him nonetheless as knowing the ins and outs of numbers like perhaps no other man on earth, and certainly knowing and applying many of the things that I'm speaking about here in Vortex-based maths. Also special thanks to the research of Jamie Buturf, Edward G. Nightingale, Pappas, and Project Shivaham, and the many mathematical and scientific texts of ancient Bharat, which Project Shivaham references and breaks down on his channel. Many of the mathematical treatises of India predate similar discoveries, which are generally credited to the Greek or Arabic names. And both Malcolm and myself give credit to the Sanskrit scriptures as the original recorded origins of these ideas. Malcolm's first real teacher in mathematics was a Tibetan guru who also studied the Sanskrit scriptures and taught Malcolm by drawing examples in the sand. The research of all of the above people contributed significantly to my understanding of all of this in some form or another, and I'll provide links to their respective work in the description below. So this video is just the very beginning, the absolute back-to-basics fundamentals of what numbers are and how they can be perceived and manipulated. In future videos, I'm going to go much deeper into some of the ways we can apply these basic laws, and I'm currently writing a book on one aspect of this subject, which I should be announcing soon. So let's get into it. It's nothing complicated, and it should be quite easy to follow. So we'll begin with a highly harmonic number, 864. 864,000 miles is the diameter of the sun, which is why I think that 864 serves as a good example to begin with. And we're going to drop the zeros for our example. The first law of Sanskrit mathematics is that a number is primarily used to identify the dimensions it represents. So zeros, ones, and decimal points simply imply an increased or decreased order of magnitude and a shift in the musical key, which we'll get into in a little bit more lately. So there's a relationship between any number that contains the same digits, even when they're shuffled in a different sequence or they contain any number of zeros or a decimal point. Anyway, generally we read this number as 864. When we're taught how numbers function when we're very young, they generally give an example like, Tommy has 864 balls in his jar. It's a way to quantify things. We can certainly consider 864 to represent 864. This is one way to view the number. which I've defined here as the total value of a composite number. Perhaps it has another already defined name in conventional mathematics, I'm honestly not sure, but this term describes what I'm referring to well enough in form and function for the purpose of this video. 864 is the total value of the composite number we see here, the combined digit sequence of 8, 6, and 4. If we consider the digits individually, their position within the overall number indicates their positional value. So when we break the number down, we can see that 8 in the third position represents 800, 6 in the second position represents 60, and 4 in the first position represents 4. But what are the other aspects of this number 864? What other information does it provide us with? Well, the other obvious law is that we could perceive the composite number by its individual modular parts. And this is the modular value, or the absolute value of the digits. From the perspective of the absolute value, we can see that 8 can always represent 8, 6 can always represent 6, and 4 can always represent 4. And this is a minor shift in perspective, obviously, but it opens up the possibility that a lot more information can be encoded within a simple number than just how many balls Tommy has in his jar. So we can see that numbers are fractal composites. They're composed of other numbers, and this is quite important to note. And it's not only the individual digits that we must consider. We will also find the total composite harmonic number is constructed of smaller sequences of multiple digit harmonic numbers too. So in this case, 864 can also be considered as being constructed from 8 and 64. And now you may wonder why I don't consider it as 86 and 4 instead, and rightly so, because I haven't explained that yet. So in conventional mathematics, we count using a base system. So for example, base 10 is what we all usually learn: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can look more into this if you're interested, but this isn't the topic of this video, so I'll just be glossing over it for now. In Sanskrit maths and Vortex-based maths, we rarely, if ever, count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. 2 pretty much never comes after 1. Instead, counting is mostly done using doubling, tripling, halving, thirding, addition, and multiplication, and the true counting system is constructed from harmonic sequences. The simplest way I've found to explain these concepts is using what I've come to call the template, named as such by my friend and teacher Edward G. Nightingale, who discovered this multi-dimensional number sequence decades ago, and he's been researching it since. And the table of numbers I'm showing here is just one element of the template. The template in its true sense also has a geometric consideration, and it's arranged in the form of a coordinate plane. But we only need to consider the arrangement of the numbers in this video. It's also been called the table of most harmonic numbers by fellow Vortex-based maths researcher Jamie Buturf, who originally credited Stanford University for discovering it. At any rate, the template is constructed using a simple doubling and tripling sequence, what Ed calls the lambda sequence. We double from the 1 down on the left side, and we triple from the 1 across the top row. And then we fill out the grid with the products of the interacting doubling and tripling sequence. Now we're counting in all directions at the same time, so you can forget about this 1, 2, 3, 4 stuff. Well, don't forget about it, it's useful, but moving on. Let's explore a few sequences we find in the template to get a little more of an idea of how harmonic numbers are constructed and how we can count with them. We find our examples so far, 864, nestled in 6 positions down from the 4th column of the template. As we saw, it could be perceived as 8 and 64 as well. If we now go up from 864, we find 432, which can similarly be perceived as 4 and 32, half of 8 and 64. We then find 216, another square above, a composite composed of 2 and 16, as well as 2 and 1 and 6, of course. And then 1 and 0, 8, half again. And of course, we're identifying the numbers accordingly because the fractal composites we find are all harmonic numbers too, the parts themselves to be found somewhere in the template. You'll find that you can use this law in many circumstances to determine the component parts of a harmonic number. After this, we have the numbers 27 and 54. We need to introduce another rule to find out more about the construction of these numbers. But this rule can be applied to absolutely any harmonic number, and it's also one of Marko Rodin's foundational laws of vortex-based mathematics. And it's also an operation known to and sometimes used by students of conventional mathematics. I originally learned the method myself from Pappus's esoteric treatise on numbers in the playing cards, the Tarot of the Bohemians. At any rate, I've called the rule here the digital root of a composite number. If we add together the digits of a multiple digit number using their absolute value, we can reduce a number back to its root and find out where it came from. So if we take 864, 8 plus 6 plus 4 equals 18, 1 plus 8 equals 9. So the digital root of 864 is 9. Alternatively, we can use this same operation on the fractal compound numbers too. So 6 plus 4 equals 10 equals 1, which would give us 81. Or 8 plus 6 equals 14. 1 plus 4 equals 5, which would give us 54, another harmonic number. Or 8 plus 6 equals 14, and then we just leave it there. It gives us 144, another harmonic number. So we can play around with subtraction too. We can do 8 minus 6, this equals 2, gives us 24. And this one doesn't work for us the other way around, as 82 isn't a harmonic number. But this is to be expected, as I should be able to clarify a bit further with another rule in a little bit about how the value of each number in relation to each other matters as well. But one thing at a time. With the larger and more complex numbers, it's more of an exercise of decryption to find which rules work to provide you with the information you're looking for. For example, if we move 1 square down from 864, doubling it to 1728, we can demonstrate an example of decrypting a compound number. We take 1 and add it to the 8, making 0729, 729 being a harmonic number. Or alternatively, we could implode the 8 and the 1 so that their sum 9 moves to be in the center of the 7 and the 2. The 7 and the 2 are a polar number pair, a pair of digital root numbers which add up to 9 in Vortex-based maths, or they expand from the 9. If we don't adjust the order of magnitude of the original number, we just add our 1 and 8 together, and then we shift the positional values of the digits, we'll have 7920. And 7,920 is the root diameter of the Earth in miles, double 3,960 miles, the root radius, and a lot more on imploding numbers shortly. So first, let's touch on another law, which is that all harmonic numbers represent the natural resonant frequencies of natural bodies and organisms, such as planets, plants, and cells, and anything that's naturally formed or grown. They also serve as the basis for the construction of the chromatic musical scale and the circle of fifths from the ground up. And it seems very likely it was employed in exactly such a way by Pythagoras and Plato in their constructions of the Western musical scale, and Edward Nightingale provides some evidence to support that theory. We can see that the frequencies encoded on the template are organized so that each column represents progressively higher frequency octaves of the same note or pitch class. And the interval between the pitch class of the note of each column is a perfect fifth. It's easy to build a full chromatic scale from the template based on the A equals 432 Hz tuning standard, but I have another video on that already called Decrypting Pythagorean Tuning, so I'll leave you to go and check that out if you're interested. But just to show the beauty of just how utterly harmonic these numbers are, and also to demonstrate a curious fact about shifting the order of magnitude of a harmonic number, if we reduce the entire sequence by one order of magnitude, so 1 becomes 0.1, we have 0.2, 0.4, 0.8, 1.6 on the doubling column there, and so on. And the same thing goes for the larger numbers, so 864 becomes 86.4. So all the numbers are just shifted down one order of magnitude. We've moved the decimal place from the end of 864, one position to the left to make it 86.4. The musical scale shifts 4 places to the right, as you'll see up the top. Now we find that this rule applies for every shift in magnitude. When we add a 0 so that the 1 becomes 10 and the 864 becomes 8,640, the scale shifts 4 places to the left instead. And it continues to do so every time we add another 0, another order of magnitude. Remembering this simple rule, we can easily determine the pitch class of any harmonic number, no matter how many zeros it has or where the decimal place is. We find that the dimensions of many important natural bodies and objects can be found within the boundaries of the initial columns and rows of numbers on the template without expanding it out too far. Of course, we could infinitely continue the doubling and tripling sequence and obtain a microtonal scale, building on the initial 12 notes, but I'm not going to go there in this video, obviously. I'm just using the template to demonstrate the fundamental aspects of numbers for the moment. So going back to the original template with an origin magnitude of 1, I demonstrated earlier how to obtain the digital root of a composite number. If we perform this operation on all of the numbers in the template, we obtain a curious sequence. The sum of the digits within the composite numbers of the first column reduced to the modular 9 doubling sequence of vortex-based maths, and the numbers in the second column reduced to an oscillating 3 and 6, representing the two polarities of the toroidal magnetic field, and the numbers of the third column from the 9 onwards all reduced to 9, the infinite path of the spirit, as Marko refers to it as. You can explore these ideas further using Marko Rodin's Abha Prima and the Rodin number maps and the toroidal blueprint. One more operation we can demonstrate on the template though, and then we'll move on to explore some other aspects of the 864. We can distill the numbers down even further to find their true origins, their sacred root or theosophic root. A similar operation is referred to as the triangulation of numbers in conventional mathematical curriculum. We've already reduced the numbers down to their digital roots, so now to take this extra step, we simply add up the component fractal parts that each number is built from. So for example, 8 equals 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 plus 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 8, which equals 36. 36 is 3 plus 6 equals 9, so 9 is the sacred or theosophic root of 8. And in this way we can find Pappus, Nikola Tesla, Marko Rodin, and Malcolm Bendall's favorite magic numbers 3, 9, and 6, accompanied by the 1 or unity, being the sacred or theosophic root of all harmonic numbers and indeed all numbers. Moving on, another way we can look at a harmonic number is by the ratios or intervals between the digits. Going back to our 864, this can represent a ratio of 8, 6 to 4. A direct example of the application of harmonic numbers to technology using this law is Malcolm Bendall's Thunderstorm Generator. The nested spheres and tubes are at a ratio of 4, the outer sphere, to 3, the center sphere, to 2, the inner flow guide sphere, to one another, which is of course the same as a ratio of 8 to 6 to 4, using our example. Malcolm has proclaimed many times that this is a large part of the secret as to why the technology produces such interesting results. And there's a direct correspondence between the ratios, dimensions in imperial inches, feet, and miles, and the resonant frequency of a harmonic number. A number can mean many different things simultaneously. Taking this rule in the other direction, we could view each digit as a dimension, and 6 is a perfect fourth below 8, and a perfect fifth above 4. But 8 times 6 times 4 will equal 192. And this is an ancient method of tuning drums and other resonant cavities to an approximate resonant frequency, manipulating time using space. And we believe this is also how rocks were tuned to an appropriate resonant frequency to then be further manipulated by sound for purposes such as levitation or melting rocks down to form specifically tuned geopolymers. So I've termed this rule the volumetric value of a composite number, simply because multiplying the dimensions of an object together gives us the volume. Malcolm claims that volume is critically important to understanding energy, as it's the determining factor of the state which the energy will be in. Time is the mold in which matter is formed. Frequency is simply work over time. If we change the volume, we change the frequency. When we change the frequency, we adjust the ratio between work or force over time. In other words, this is one of the fundamental secrets of time dilation, as simplistic as it appears on the surface. In Malcolm's notes, he states that this law involving the product of the digits within a number is the first key to the Plasmoid Unification Model. You can hear more of Malcolm's explanation of the relationship between volume and frequency in the Foxhole podcast with George Howard and Adam Young, available on the Cosmic Summit YouTube channel, which I'll link to below. And of course, this leads into a more complex rule regarding area, volume, and time, the basis of Malcolm's toroidal model of the elements, a model for the calculation of the resonant frequency and geometry of the elements, which we're not going to get into in this video. If you'd like to see me delve further into topics like this and be able to put the time into researching them, breaking them down, and explaining them, remember you can donate to the channel with the link in the description. I work completely open source. All my work gets published directly here on the channel, free to view, so your contributions go a long way and they're greatly appreciated. But back to the topic of volumetric value. As is the norm with multiplication and the calculation of volume, when we view numbers from this perspective, it doesn't matter what order they're in. We can shuffle the sequence so that it's 4 times 8 times 6 or 6 times 8 times 4 instead, and we'll always get the same result, no matter the sequence of the digits, and the result is, of course, 192 in this example. From other perspectives, though, the way we shuffle the numbers is a factor that matters. The digits' positions in the sequence and their linear modular value in relation to one another shows us how this number, used as a ratio, frequency, or volume, will influence the field when it's employed to construct an appropriate arch form. And it also gives us some further information about natural bodies like planets and rocks, if we know their dimensions or their resonant frequencies, which in many cases we already do. So in these examples, the blue spirals indicate clockwise, centripetally converging, contracting, or imploding motion, and the red spirals indicate counterclockwise, centrifugally diverging, expanding, or exploding motion. The green lines indicate no motion. Malcolm calls them ether numbers. In the first example, 8 is a higher value than 6 in the middle, and so the 8 is centrifugally diverging or exploding counterclockwise from the 6 in the center. The 4 is a lower value than the 6, and so it's centripetally converging or imploding clockwise towards the 6 in the center. In the next example, both the 4 and the 6 are centripetally converging or imploding clockwise towards the 8, which is of a higher value than both the 4 and the 6. The center number acts as the axle or fulcrum between the outer two numbers. In the bottom left example, we see that 3, 3, and 3 all share the same value, and so this is a composite number that represents no motion within the field. And this is a law that Malcolm applies and references quite frequently throughout his notes and lectures, and it's admittedly the one I currently probably understand the least, which is something I intend to work on, as it's perhaps the most important law in regards to unifying numbers with the physics of conjugate field structures. I've included a quote from Malcolm, which he used in relation to imploding and exploding numbers when we spoke about it. "There are no straight lines in nature. All lines are curved. All curves are part of a spiral. All spirals can only go in two directions: clockwise, imploding, or anti-clockwise, exploding." And this is very similar to what Ken Wheeler says too, so I dug up this quote that I remembered from Ken that I thought was highly fitting here. "All spiral movement is natural movement around a fulcrum as against its conjugate." So be certain that we will explore this rule further in future videos as I get more grip on its practical applications. For now, we're moving on though. One more simple and fairly obvious rule before we crack on to talk more about shuffled and mirrored numbers, which is where it gets very interesting again. A number can of course be negative or positive. Negative numbers are indicated by the horizontal minus line preceding them, and positive numbers generally indicated by having no symbol preceding them. There isn't too much need to explain something that's so foundational to everyday mathematics already. However, it's important to note that the concept of negative numbers hasn't always been a given. It was considered somewhat of a revolution in mathematics in ancient times, and negative numbers form part of the core language used to describe frequency in terms of oscillations or waves. Most technology couldn't exist without employing negative numbers. You can check out Project Shivaham's fantastic video on the origin of negative numbers in the link that I put in the description. He uses a really easy to follow format to explain things, and I've taken inspiration from his video for this one. We're going to use positive and negative numbers in a bit of a different way as mirrored or shuffled conjugates in a moment though. But first we need to introduce shuffled and mirrored numbers. Here I've simply laid out all of the different positions we can uniquely arrange the digits 8, 6, and 4 to demonstrate what I mean. We can see that 4, 6, 8 is the mirror of 8, 6, 4. 4, 8, 6 is the mirror of 6, 8, 4. And 6, 4, 8 is the mirror of 8, 4, 6. Malcolm's rediscovered something very curious here in how we can use these mirrored and shuffled numbers, and I'd consider it one of his greatest contributions to mathematics and potentially to physics. It should truly make us question if we currently have any idea at all of the full applications and true origins of mathematics and numbers. In these three boxes, I've formed an equation and a sequence from the 6 possible mirrored shuffled numbers derived from 8, 6, and 4, where one number is positive, polarized with its mirror, which is negative. We can see that this results in a sequence that terminates in a common origin, 0, each time, first passing through 99, 495, 297, and either 396 or 693. Two of the sequences first begin with 198, while the third skips directly to the 396 step of the sequence. So what are these numbers? They're compounds of what Marko Rodin calls the polar number pairs. And according to both Marko and Malcolm, all the other numbers originate from the number 9. The polar number pairs are the first double-digit expansion from the 9. They're summed together, always adding up to 9. So 9 inches is said to be the span of God's hand, with which he used to mold creation in the Bible. And 9 inches is also said to be the measure of Krishna's universal form in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And 9 is also referenced to be a divine number and the numerical value of the most great name of God in the Baha'i scriptures, the primary influence of Marko Rodin's discoveries. The number 9 is as infinite in its possibilities as all of mathematics together is, for all the other harmonic numbers ultimately originate from the 9 and they can return to it. In each of the 3-digit results here, we see that the 9 is at the center: 198, 693, or 396, 297, and 495. And on either side of the 9, we find the polar number pairs. The first single-digit pairs expanded from the 9. The 1 and 8 surrounding the 9 in 198 are the first polar number pair, which would, of course, transform 198 into the 99 that we find later in the sequence in an alternative fashion to the one that we've shown here. 6 and 3 are the next polar number pair, and they, of course, also equal 9 when added together. And then 2 and 7 and 4 and 5 are the final 2 polar number pairs. 9 and 0 could also be considered as a pair in some respects too. They obviously add up to 9, but they're not classified as such in Vortex-based maths or Sanskrit maths. However, 9 and 0 are in a sense polarized, 0 representing the 0 point and 9 representing the endless journey or expansion of the spirit. What's more is that we can ascertain sequences of the same pattern not only when we polarize mirrored harmonic number pairs, but also when we polarize any of the shuffled pairs. For instance, we can polarize 864 with the shuffled number 648, and the pattern of the sequence is maintained. Only this time the first results in the sequence is 216. So let's try and decrypt what's going on with 216 by applying a few of the laws that we've learned so far. If we implode 2 and 6, adding them together, this equals 8. So we're left with 1 and 8 again, or 8 and 1. Either way, 8 plus 1 is, of course, our first polar number pair again, and equals 9. This law is how Malcolm Bendall derives the planetary octave sequences detailed in his notes, and this is what bridges his work with the ideas of Plato and Pythagoras regarding the music of the spheres. The radius and diameter of all the celestial bodies correspond to particular harmonic numbers. 864, the example we're using, is what Malcolm refers to as a sun number, 864,000 miles being the diameter of our solar system's sun. Half of 864, or 1 octave down from 864, is 432, the radius of the sun, and a number that's well known as the traditional frequency used to tune musical instruments before the standard was changed to 440 Hz. Half of 432 is 216, which represents the diameter of the moon, 2,160 miles. 396 represents the harmonic radius of the Earth, 3,960 miles, half the diameter of 7,920 miles, as we discussed earlier. But let's shuffle the sequences a couple more times to make sure that the law holds. When we polarize 846 and 468, we get the result 378. And we apply the same law here. 3 plus 8 equals 11. 1 plus 1 equals 2. And this leaves us with 27, a polar number pair again. 2 plus 7 equals 9. If we shuffle again and polarize 846 with 486, we get 360 this time. 3 and 6 are, of course, already a polar number pair. The 0 doesn't count, and they add up to 9. We can try shuffling in other ways, and we'll find that the pattern always stays true, whichever way we configure it. In the bottom example, 1 plus 2 is, of course, 3, and 6 plus 3 is a polar number pair and equals 9. There are several other possibilities of shuffled combinations of 8, 6, and 4 that we can try, but I think this about covers the unique combinations, and you can write out the full sequences and explore them yourself further if you're interested. The law works for all harmonic numbers. If we take 144, the number representing light on the Plasmoid Unification Model, and we polarize it with its mirrored pair 441, we find the pattern again. So 144 minus 441 equals negative 297, and 441 minus 144 equals 297. It doesn't matter which number we use, as long as you can find it in the template, as long as it's a product of the doubling and tripling sequence, we'll find that applying this law will lead us to the polar number pairs and ultimately back to 9 and then 0. So I mentioned Malcolm's octave sequences earlier, the focus of a large part of his notes, and also showed how the octave sequence is just the doubling sequence, demonstrated on the vertical axis of the template when we consider the numbers as frequencies. So going up an octave is synonymous with doubling, and going down an octave is synonymous with halving. This is the planetary octave sequence from the diameter of the Sun, in part 17 to 20 of Malcolm's notes. We can see it is, of course, just a doubling and halving sequence from 864,000. And if we were to expand our doubling and tripling template far enough, we'd find all of these numbers on there as well. So let's see if we find the same pattern on some of these larger, more complex numbers in the octave sequence. So if we mirror the number right at the top of the page, the last one we see here in the doubling sequence, so 452984832000, and we minus its mirrored pair from it, 00023849254, this will equal 4527463424746. And obviously this really doesn't look familiar to any of us yet. We're too far from unification and the number is still way too large and complex, although it is indeed actually still a harmonic composite number. So let's keep going with the sequence for a bit and see what we find. And I'm not going to read these out. These numbers are just ridiculous. You can look at them. All right, stay with me. There's stuff to decrypt in these numbers, but we're not going to do that today. All right, hello. So this 960000399, that's a familiar number. We got 9, 6, and 3. It did end up somewhere. So as I mentioned, the numbers in the sequence before this point, they're not arbitrary. They are composites, and they can be decrypted and used in numerous ways, as I've shown previously in some of the more simple examples. However, it's at this point in the sequence where the pattern becomes more obviously visible again. We know we never really need to do anything with the 9s or the 0s. They've already been reduced as far as they're going to go. However, we can add together the 6 and 3, which are of course a polar number pair, and make up another 9, so that we conclude with a sequence of 9s and 0s as expected. But we can also carry on with the polarized sequence as we did before as well. So I'll just let you look at the equations on the screen again. So this time, if we look at the result, we can implode the polar number pair of 7 and 2, so on either side of this set of 4 9s in the center, and then also the pair of 3 and 6. We can end up with all 9s and 0s again. And then same in this next number. Here we can implode the 2 7s and the 2 2s, which are polar number pairs, and the 5 and the 4, which is another. So back to all 9s again. So continuing the sequence, you probably get the picture by now. 5 and 4 is 9, and 5 and 4 is 9 again. The next one, polar number pair, 1 plus 8 equals 9. And the same again, 1 and 8 equals 9. And this keeps going for a while. So here's the remainder of the sequence. And then it just keeps repeating at this point, switching between the polarized positive and negatives of 219998 and 6599934, and their mirrored opposites. And we'll find all of the polar number pairs within these two composite numbers. So in 219998, we have 2 and 7 and 8 and 1. And in 6599934, we of course have 6 and 3 and 5 and 4 are the other two pairs. Reducing both numbers once again to only 9s and 0s. And of course, when this pair of 9999 numbers are polarized, we will again reduce to 0. We can perform the same operation on the decimal numbers too, like 421.875. You'll just end up with 9.9 when you follow the sequence through in this case. We can also expand multiple octave sequences from each digit within a composite number too. So for example, instead of constructing a sequence from 864, the full composite number, we construct an octave sequence from 8, 8, 16, 32, 64, 128, so on, and then the same from 6 and then from 4 respectively, using these doubling the octaves. Many of these laws can be used on either the total value of the composite number or on its modular absolute parts. Numbers are fractal composites, and the only way to really get a proper hold on this is just to sit down with a calculator or a pen and paper and just spend some time getting to know them, starting with different harmonic numbers and going through the sequences, decrypting the resulting numbers as you go to find out more about them. What I've gone through in this video constitutes the foundational laws of mathematics Malcolm Bendall used to construct the Plasmoid Unification Model. As I've shown, there is an enormous amount of data contained with even a very simple number such as 864. It would take hours longer to explain the full significance of these harmonic numbers and the laws that I've shown in this video. They appear all throughout history, the numbers. When you hear that various geniuses over the decades decrypted the secrets behind their work from the scriptures or from ancient esoteric myths or stories, they're saying this because it's true. The Bible, the Baha'i scriptures, the Sanskrit and Vedic scriptures, many Masonic and Martinist texts, and the works of the ancient Greek and Egyptian schools are absolutely riddled with these numbers and further hidden sequences which can be derived from them. As we discussed earlier, these sequences are the origin of the musical scale too, and it's self-evident that they were overwhelmingly likely to have been an aspect of Pythagoras's and Plato's original discoveries, what they're referencing about the music of the spheres, and even before this, to have been used to construct the Vedic 12 and 24-note chromatic scales too. So we find that music is very much related with physics, and so is mathematics. It's not some kind of arbitrary designation that just happens. It all just adds up so that we have so many reference points, so it's not funny, which all tell us that we're on the right path to understanding something that was undoubtedly very significant to ancient scientists from many different civilizations. The wider implications of this are enormous. This is all we have time for in this video for now, and it's still a work in progress. Thanks again to Malcolm Bendall for his collaboration in helping me compile and explain these laws. As I say, he rediscovered the majority of what I presented here. I just assisted in compiling and making it comprehensible. So this is all presented open source, but we would appreciate credit for the work, obviously. And I have mentioned several practical applications in this video, so obviously these ideas cannot be patented. They are intended to be open source and stay open source. And once again, thanks also to Marko Rodin. As I say, there's a lot of crossover between Malcolm and Marko's work. They consider each other friends and colleagues, and I consider myself a student of them both. I've learned several of these concepts originally from Marko and Vortex-based maths, often applied in a slightly different context. And as I say, this can be essentially considered synonymous with Vortex-based maths. Sanskrit maths is Vortex-based maths. Marko was rediscovering elements of the same thing. And finally, thanks to Edward G. Nightingale, who taught me a lot about his discoveries in the template and the lambda sequence, which we've used to demonstrate a lot in this video. And that enabled me to demonstrate things a lot more clearly here. You can go and check out his work too. And as usual, I've linked to all of the research and the people I've mentioned in the video in the description. Go and follow it up. By the way, our chemical science has just about hit 10,000 subscribers. So if you haven't subscribed yet, you know what to do. Please help me keep growing the channel. It's going really well. If you'd like to help financially support my open source research, please consider donating using the link in the description or the YouTube thanks button. And to those who've already contributed, thank you. You're directly contributing to these videos being possible. Thank you all, and good night.